Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of colors by the United States Marine Corps Ceremonial Guard and remain standing for our national anthem. Advance the colors. Retire the colors. Please be seated.
We are dependent on the sea for political, economic, and military reasons. But the trend in this country today is to not recognize that. The trend today is to, well, we're self-sufficient. Well, we don't need to be friends with so-and-so. We don't need to deter. It doesn't affect us. The world is an environment that does affect us. Something happening such as clearing land in the Amazon rainforest will affect us. The United States has to understand that we are still a maritime nation, and maritime activity is vital to most nations. Our ability to be able to trade with whom we want, when we want by sea, because you can't carry grain by airplane, is vital. And I think you gentlemen, I think the Navy League, I think all of us should help make people in the United States, our leadership, and just the population aware of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the CEO of the Navy League of the United States and 13th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Mike Stevens.
Wow, what a crowd. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you. For those that don't know me, I'm Mike Stevens, the CEO of the Navy League, and on behalf of the National President of the Navy League, Mr. Dave Riley, and all our Navy League members worldwide, welcome. Welcome to Sea Air Space 2023. Dave, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. So this is Dave Riley's last Sea Air Space, and I might add, he's the only president in the history of the Navy League to do 3 Sea Air Spaces, because we did one in August. So this will be his last one as our national president. It says in my remarks, please give him a round of applause, but we've already done that, Dave, so we'll leave that, right? But again, okay, that's good. All of us, especially me, would like to thank Dave for his steadfast leadership over the last 2 years. So thank you, Dave. We would also like to recognize the president-elect who will be coming in June of this year at our national convention in Dallas, Texas. And our president-elect is Chris, AKA Townie. He's an aviator, so Townie's his call sign, Townsend. So Chris, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Townie and Dave and I were in his room last night, and I said to Townie, every national president thinks they know what they're getting into until they get into it, right? So we look forward to working with you, Townie. Sea Air Space would simply not be possible without the support of our Sea Service leadership, industry experts, speakers, exhibitors, and of course, our amazing sponsors. And I'd like to take just a minute to recognize our 4-star sponsors, CACI, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Peraton, SAIC. Then our 2-star sponsors, Airbus, BAE Systems, Blue Halo, Bullinger Shipyards, CAES, and EY. This year marks our 57th, that's right, our 57th Sea Airspace Exposition. And it promises to be as bold as our theme, a maritime century. From protecting the homeland and borders of sovereign nations, to the transatlantic security, to global shipping routes and trade, the security of our seas is more important than ever before. The Navy League has been a stalwart in our dedication to our sea services for over 120 years, and we will continue to fulfill our mission of education, advocacy, and support in these times where emerging powers threaten to assert their control over the global maritime domain. To all who serve in and out of uniform and dedicate their lives to maintaining America's allied and partner nation sea power, thank you. Now, I would like to introduce the Honorable Eric Raven, our Undersecretary of the Navy. The Honorable Eric Raven assumed the responsibilities of the Undersecretary of the Navy in April of '22. He serves as the Department of the Navy's Chief Operating Officer, Chief Management Officer. He is responsible for providing oversight and policy for defense and naval strategy, intelligence and intelligence-related activities, sensitive activities and special access programs, space activities, critical infrastructure, small business programs, and the Naval Service Audit. Additionally, he is responsible for business operations, performance management, and risk management within the department. In other words, he doesn't do anything, right? So, I'm just kidding, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Raven has served in a variety of legislative senior leadership positions in the federal government. Before his nomination, Mr. Raven was the principal advisor to the Democratic chairs and the vice chairs of the Committee on Appropriations and Subcommittee on Defense on budget matters relating to the Department of Defense and intelligence community. Mr. Raven also served as an advisor in the offices of Senators Feinstein, Kennedy, and Byrd, advising on defense, foreign affairs, homeland security, veterans, space, and transportation policy issues. Mr. Raven holds a master's degree in the history of international relations from the London School of Economics and a bachelor's of art in international relations from Connecticut College. Please, everyone, welcome me and welcoming our Honorable Eric Raven, the Undersecretary of the Navy.
Hey, good morning, Navy League. This is the audience participation part of the speech, so let me hear it again. Good morning. All right. As you might have already noticed, I'm a little hoarse this morning. I've learned this lesson long ago that if it's sea, air, and space, it's spring in Washington, D.C. And if it's spring in Washington, D.C., it means I'm going to CVS to buy every box of Claritin that is on the shelf. So please bear with me. But thank you, Mike, for that really kind introduction, and also for the invitation to be here for the leading off speaker for this year's edition of Sea, Air, and Space. As Undersecretary of the Navy, I'm truly appreciative of the work that the Navy League does year in and year out to provide all of us opportunities like Sea, Air, and Space to come together and discuss how to tackle the challenges our nation faces in the maritime domain. As I look out across the audience, I'm encouraged to see many familiar faces from all facets of our maritime defense ecosystem, ranging from Congress to private industry, as well as decision makers from across federal government, in attendance today to be here a part of these important conversations. And as I approach my first anniversary in office next week, I can tell you with certainty that our Navy and Marine Corps are strong, capable, and ready. As Secretary Del Toro said last week during his testimony in front of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees, a strong Navy and Marine Corps is the foundation upon which the success of the joint force rests. In order to ensure this foundation is rock solid, the Department of the Navy is guided by our three enduring priorities: strengthening maritime dominance, building a culture of warfighting excellence, and enhancing our strategic partnerships. We are increasing our fleet's capability through construction of several classes of ships and submarines. This includes our first Columbia-class ballistic missile nuclear-powered submarine, the USS District of Columbia, supporting the modernization of our nation's most survivable leg of the nuclear deterrent. On the surface, construction continues on the first-in-class frigate USS Constitution, and we look forward to commissioning the fleet's first Flight III Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the USS Jack H. Lucas, later this fall. With the support of President Biden through his fiscal year 2024 budget request, we will continue to make the investments necessary to build our Navy and Marine Corps' capacity, capability, and lethality. This year's budget request includes top-line budget increases for both of our naval services, with $202 billion for our Navy and $53 billion for our Marine Corps. This $255 billion allocation for the Department of the Navy is a 4.5% increase over what was enacted in FY23 and represents the President's commitment to ensuring America has a strong Navy and Marine Corps to serve as a credible deterrent against potential adversaries and, if necessary, be victorious in combat. The President's budget makes strong investments across several categories to strengthen our naval expeditionary forces. This includes a 50% increase for munitions, including multi-year procurement strategies for advanced missiles, a record $26.9 billion for research and development, and billions more for infrastructure development, workforce development, and increasing the capacity of our defense industrial base. With the support of our partners in Congress, we look forward to funding these lines of effort dedicated to strengthening our fleet and our force. Our Navy and Marine Corps are more than just advanced platforms and weapon systems. Our people remain our greatest strength and are at the heart of everything that we do. Over the past year, we have worked tirelessly to make quality of life improvements for our sailors, Marines, and their families through a focus on better housing, expanding access to childcare, implementing new strategies to combat destructive behavior wherever they may be found. The President's FY24 budget request accelerates these initiatives. We're asking Congress to fund new child development centers, more mental health professionals, a renewed commitment to naval education, and a 5.2% pay raise for all of our service members and civilians, and more. To be an employer of choice for America's best and brightest, we must do everything we can to offer a competitive benefits package to both attract and to retain our talented sailors and Marines. Last month, I testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on the challenges we face in recruiting and retaining the personnel necessary to ensure we are mission ready. We are in a competition for talent, not just in recruiting sailors and Marines, but in attracting government civilians and employees and to the defense industrial base to support our fleet and our force. To ensure we have the workforce necessary to sustain our Navy and Marine Corps team, I ask that everyone here today share your stories about service to the nation, whether it is in or out of uniform, to inspire our fellow Americans to consider a career supporting our Navy and Marine Corps. In addition to our focus on recruiting, retaining, and improving the quality of life for our personnel, we are committed to developing our partnerships, both internationally and domestically. In the Indo-Pacific, we are advancing our trilateral AUKUS security partnership, with our Navy playing a leading role in supporting the Royal Australian Navy's acquisition of a conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarine, as well as the modernization of the UK's submarine fleet. As President Biden announced in San Diego last month, alongside his British and Australian counterparts, beginning this year, we will be welcoming Australian sailors and civilians to embed across our submarines, installations, and industrial base to support them as they develop a capacity necessary to build, crew, and maintain a new generation of submarines. As we look forward to the early 2030s, with the support and the approval of our partners in Congress, we intend to sell at least 3 and up to 5 Virginia-class submarines to Australia, ahead of the deliveries of SS and AUKUS later in the decade. We look forward to continuing to play a leading role as we advance this critical partnership with 2 close allies. Regarding our domestic partnerships, I would be remiss if I did not spend a few minutes ahead of this morning's panel highlighting our relationship with 2 of our department's most critical federal government partners, the United States Coast Guard and the Department of Transportation's Maritime Administration. Our sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and merchant mariners are inseparable when it comes to projecting American naval power across the globe. From our country's founding to the present day, we have been integrated in support of our nation's security. The Maritime Administration is charged with promoting the development and maintenance of a strong merchant marine in support of our national defense. And I've been familiar with MARAD since well before I became Undersecretary of the Navy. In the 1990s, I learned to fly in Northern California at Concord Airport. And I remember very well that the check-in point for runway 32 right was the Ghost Fleet in Sassoon Bay. And I'll tell you, I remember very specifically looking down from my Cessna 150 that I was flying then. There was a big deck in there. And I remember, I bet you I could probably land this airplane on that deck. But somebody, thanks to the Maritime Administration, very thoughtfully and subtly put that big X, no landing here. And it was a subtle message, but well received, so that's probably why I'm standing here before you today. So I didn't know it then, but those ships and the work MARAD does on a daily basis would become important to me in my role today. Through the National Defense Reserve Fleet and the Ready Reserve Force, the Maritime Administration maintains a large fleet of ships ready to meet our maritime logistics requirements to move our people and equipment to wherever we are needed. MARAD doesn't just provide us with scalable strategic sea lift capacity. They are also a fellow investor in our domestic shipbuilding industrial base. They offer tens of millions of dollars in grants annually for modernizing our small shipyards and training a skilled workforce to support them, totaling over $282 million since 2008. As the MARAD Administrator, the Honorable Ann Phillips, stated this past January, investing in these shipyards ensures our nation maintains expertise and skills that are critical to both our economic and our national security. Secretary Del Toro and I couldn't agree more, and we appreciate Administrator Phillips' commitment to investing in our domestic shipbuilding industry. In addition to MARAD, we have enjoyed a strong partnership with our nation's oldest continuous seagoing service, the United States Coast Guard, since the earliest days of our Navy and Marine Corps. In December 2020, Admiral Gilday, General Berger, and then Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Schultz, published Advantage at Sea, an updated tri-service maritime strategy acknowledging how the world has changed since the previous strategy was published in 2015. They recognize the challenges we face from the People's Republic of China, Russia, and malign actors such as the regimes of Iran and North Korea. This revised strategy charted a course for how the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard integrate today to meet these challenges head-on. As we gather here today, our sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardmen are deployed around the world together, from the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific. We are supporting the Coast Guard's fleet modernization efforts through providing Navy-type, Navy-owned weapons, sensors, and communication systems. As the Coast Guard replaces their legacy platforms with more capable modern cutters outfitted with this gear, we increase our capability to seamlessly integrate, allowing for mutual support in a variety of missions. The Coast Guard also plays a central role in fostering international partnerships, supporting other maritime nations as they address issues such as piracy, smuggling, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, all of which have negative consequences on our economy. The goodwill the Coast Guard builds not only benefits the Navy and Marine Corps as we look to expand our own network of partners, but demonstrates that the United States of America is a trustworthy partner and a responsible leader in the maritime domain. As Admiral Fagan stated last month in her first State of the Coast Guard address, we may be small, but we are incredibly capable. We are proud to serve alongside them as they protect, defend, and save. The partnerships our department maintains with both the Maritime Administration and the Coast Guard are the ones we do not take for granted. We are committed to strengthening the bonds we share with our fellow sea services to ensure the nation's maritime economy is supported and protected. In closing, I could not be more honored to serve with our sailors, Marines, and their families in my role as Undersecretary of the Navy. I'm proud of the work our department has done over the past year, and I look forward to sharing our progress and successes with you at next year's Sea, Air, and Space. Thank you again for your time this morning and for everything you all do in support of our sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, merchant mariners, and their families. And on that note, it is my honor to introduce the members of today's Sea Service Chiefs Leadership Panel. I'm excited to hear today's discussion on building our nation's future forces and their roles and the roles that our respective services will play in the coming decade for our national security. So please join me in welcoming our all-star panel. First, Admiral Mike Gilday, Chief of Naval Operations. Great to see you. General David Berger, Commandant of the Marine Corps. Admiral Linda Fagan, Commandant of the Coast Guard. And the Honorable Ann Phillips, Administrator of the Maritime Administration. And finally, the moderator of today's panel, Mr. Francis Rose, founder and host of the podcast, The Federal Government Today. Thanks so much. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the panel.
Well, thank you, Mr. Undersecretary. It's great to see you. Folks, it's great to see you again. Thank you very much for participating today. I want to thank the Navy League for inviting me to be a part of this event again this year. Mike Stevens, very gracious and kind as always. Julia Simpson is just crushing it putting this event together. Jamie Fogo is here somewhere. Jamie, I appreciate your help in preparing me for this event. A lot of folks that I've seen so far today have said, when are you going to be back on television again? And I'm pleased to, a little plug if you don't mind, FedGov Today with Francis Rose debuts on Channel 7 here in Washington April 30th, Sunday mornings at 10:30 every week after that. So I'll look forward to hopefully seeing all of you on the show. We have microphones in the room for taking questions, and I want those questions to be a part of this conversation. I made sure I had my glasses so that I can see when there are people at the microphones to take those questions. And we're going to begin with a few moments of conversation with each of the chiefs. I have a few questions, and then it's all up to you. So we will begin, please, with the Maritime Administrator, Ann Phillips. You have the stage.
All right, thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to see everyone this morning. Welcome. And I'm thrilled and very humbled to be here with my colleagues, Mike Gilday, General Berger, and Commandant Fagan. So, Maritime Administration. Let's talk. Let's talk about what's actually going on at the Maritime Administration right now. Our mission is to foster, promote, and develop the maritime industry of the United States to ensure the nation's economic and security needs are met. I can tell you that it's an extremely busy time at the Maritime Administration right now. It's a small but scrappy agency, about 730 people. A third of them are here in Washington, D.C. A third are at the Merchant Marine Academy. We own the Merchant Marine Academy, Kings Point. And a third of them are at our fleet support sites around the country, overseeing the maintenance of our Ready Reserve Force, our Ghost Fleet, which the Secretary referred to earlier, and our Port and Infrastructure Gateway Directors. There are 10 Gateway Directors around the country. Our budget is about $2.2 billion in the FY24 budget request. About $809 million of that comes from DOD in support of the Ready Reserve Force. The rest comes from DOT, including a substantial influx of funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in support of port infrastructure development. So, just so you know, that's the things that are keeping us busy. My top 3 priorities, and I would add challenges. First of all, safety. Safety is the North Star of the department. Safety is certainly our North Star within the Maritime Administration. Safety for mariners at sea is a critical part of what we are working on within the administration. Along with that, we are, as many other agencies are, challenged to find enough mariners. You heard the Secretary refer to the goodness of serving a career in the military. Well, there's goodness to serving on a career in the Merchant Marine as well, and we need you. We need mariners. We're short, we know that, and we share that need with certainly the armed services and many others around the country. We are working to develop a strategy with the many stakeholders involved in this process. It's really a whole of government process to recruit, train, retain, and reduce barriers to joining the Merchant Marine. In that end, kind of a two-prong approach. First of all, back to safety, ensuring safety for our mariners at sea. And secondly, building new training vessels. The National Multi-Mission Support Vessel is under construction now in Philadelphia. 4 are under construction. All 5 are authorized and appropriated. The first ship, Empire State, will be delivered later this summer. If you haven't seen them, you should come see them. They're a very interesting and successful program, and as I was telling folks earlier, however, the proof is in the pudding. Once we put to sea, then we'll know what we truly have. But Philly's done an exceptional job, and if you haven't had a chance to get up there and take a look at those ships, please do so. Back to the safety of mariners. In December of 2021, the Maritime Administration, and all credit goes to my current deputy, Lucinda Leslie, who was acting administrator at the time, developed the Embark, Every Mariner Builds a Respectful Culture program. That program was to ensure safety for mariners at sea. If you have served in the military, you're very familiar with sexual assault prevention and response programs. There was no comparable program in the maritime industry. Now there is. The Embark program was put into law in the FY23 NDAA. We thank Congress for doing that. And it now requires that in order for our U.S. flag vessels to take cadets, they must be a part of this program. And it gives us some teeth to ensure their interest over time in that we can withhold a stipend that they receive under the Maritime Security Program. I'm proud to say, and thank industry and labor, all of our operators are enrolled in the program. 16 operators are enrolled, and that makes 140 ships available for cadets to sail on. But really, in working with our partnership in the Coast Guard, this is ensuring safety for all mariners at sea, not just midshipmen. Our focus is midshipmen because we are concerned about Kings Point cadets and State Maritime Academy cadets going to sea. But this is to improve safety at sea for all mariners. Why does that matter? Back to the recruit, train, retain, and reduce barriers. We need mariners. 7% of the U.S. mariner fleet, in the U.S. flag fleet are women. We're very short of women mariners, and we're very short of minority mariners. We want mariners to think that when they go to sea, they will be valued based on their experience and their ability and their knowledge and their skills. We don't want them to be afraid of what might happen to them when they're out there. We're taking this very seriously, and again, we thank Congress and all stakeholders for making progress there. Moving to the Ready Reserve. Recapitalizing the Ready Reserve Force is one of our priorities. Secretary Raven mentioned it. We have a fleet of 45 ships and growing that are maintained on a 5-day notice to move to provide support to the Transportation Command, General Van Ovos, anywhere in the world in support of our nation's bidding. These vessels are stationed around the country. If you've seen a gray ship with a red, white, and blue stripe on the stack, that is a Ready Reserve Force vessel. I say that because I spent quite a bit of my years in the Navy wondering what those things were. Now you know. They activate when called upon. We have 9 vessels activated now, 8 from the Ready Reserve, supporting needs of TRANSCOM, which range from exercises to support for the Ukraine operations. It's very important that we continue our work to recapitalize these vessels. The average age is 45. I can politely say there are some that are as old as I am, and you will have to guess how old that is. However, we are working a 2-pronged approach right now of a 3-pronged strategy developed by the Navy in its document, Sea Lift That the Nation Needs, DoD, in 2018. The 2 prongs are service life extension for some of the vessels in particular, and buying new vessels, used vessels, new to us, through the Vessel Acquisition Manager program. We've purchased 2. We have 3 more coming on board soon. Later this month, we'll start that process. And we are authorized to buy 2 a year to continue to recapitalize this force so that we can focus on working on with more modern and more current vessels as we move forward. The 3rd prong would be to build new. We received an authorization in the 2023 NDAA to do that. We did not receive an appropriation. But I want to get that out there, that is considered as an option. So, finally, port infrastructure development. I mentioned that earlier. We run a port infrastructure development grant program. Thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's an infusion of $450 million a year over 5 years. This is the 2nd year that we will have that amount of money, plus an appropriation on offer. Last year, we had almost $700 million on offer, and were able to dispense 41 grants for 22 states and 1 territory. This grant program is focused on improving movement of goods throughout our nation's ports. Roughly 25% of ports that are awarded grants through this program every year are strategic sea lift ports, which are of great interest to our Department of Defense because that is how we would outflow materials in support of our nation's needs. So that's what we're doing in the Maritime Administration right now. There are other grant programs as well, which Secretary Raven mentioned, but I want to focus on PIDP because that is the one that has so much capacity right now. And the Notice of Funding Opportunity is posted. Grants close April 28th. We look forward to passing out $600 and some billion again this year. Thank you.
Administrator Phillips, thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. Commandant Fagan, the floor is yours, ma'am.
All right, thank you. It's a privilege to be here with everyone this morning. I very much look forward to Sea Air Space every year and to the conversations, questions, opportunity to talk a little bit about our nation's Coast Guard. I've been serving just short of a year now as Commandant and have grown to appreciate even more the capacity and capability that the United States Coast Guard brings to the nation as a maritime force and to partners and allies truly around the world. My predecessors often talked about global demand on the Coast Guard. We are a global Coast Guard. We're a global force. Coast Guard men and women are serving literally around the world in support of every one of the combatant commanders. So whether it's fast response cutters based in Bahrain or a national security cutter based in Honolulu that's operating in the Western Pacific alongside our Navy and Marine counterparts, we truly are able to bring our capability, authorities, capacity, culture, leadership to maritime governance problem sets around the world. And so that demand has never been higher, which as I consider our priorities as an organization, the largest acquisition programs since World War II we are in the midst of now, and we remain committed to those acquisition projects. So for example, Polar Security Cutter, the 24 President's budget funds us through long lead time for the third Polar Security Cutter. We are an Arctic nation, and it is critical to our national sovereignty and security that we field Polar Security Cutter. We're building it with a joint program office with the Navy, and we'll continue to commit to that activity, as well as all of the other new acquisitions that we have going on. Our role in the homeland, the Maritime Administrator talked about MARAD and their role. We help ensure the security and resiliency of the maritime transportation system in the country, contributes $5.4 trillion to our U.S. Economy. Truly, our well-being, our economic prosperity as a nation relies on a resilient, reliable port infrastructure and access, and the Coast Guard has a key role in ensuring those cargo and goods flow safely and securely for the nation. Your Coast Guard's involved in cyber. We have cyber protection teams and cyber mission teams that we've stood up. We've been investing in that capacity, not just for ourselves and our own IT infrastructure, but to begin to partner with industry again in the ports and harbors of the country to ensure that cyber is not a weak point for those goods and flow. My highest priorities, I'm not going to unpack sort of the Coast Guard strategy that's out there, but the highest priority is around people. You're going to hear it, I think, from all of us that while it's great to be on budget for new assets, new ships and aircraft, if we don't make the investments in the people, it won't. The aircraft won't operate. The ships won't be able to maneuver. We've been investing in recruiting capacity, marketing strategies to bring people into the service. It's one thing. I recently was in Cape May. Our enlisted accession point. We graduated a company there. I will tell you that the talent we are getting is second to none. I was incredibly impressed with this group of young people. They knew why they joined the service. They knew what the value proposition was. They were excited to be in uniform and knew that they had joined something bigger than self and that they would be making a difference for their nation as they served. That talent is out there, but each of us needs to inspire that generation into service, into uniform, into government service. So we're working a lot of personnel policies to help eliminate barriers to joining, eliminate barriers to staying and retaining. And part of that investment focus is around child care, health care, medical access, things that become critical to the families that we are retaining. We've got a number of initiatives going on around data and analytics. I won't unpack those here, but look forward to the questions. And suffice it to say, your Coast Guard is ready. We're fully integrated with the other maritime services, and we are campaigning every day here in the homeland and abroad to ensure our nation's security and our economic prosperity. Thank you.
Commandant, thank you very much. I appreciate those comments. Commandant Berger, the floor is yours, sir.
Also, thanks to the Navy League for organizing this. This is a great event. We get the benefit of looking out and seeing this audience. It strikes me looking around how many different uniforms are here. So I'm mentioning that because I'm grateful that all the international military leaders could make the trip this week. Our strategy depends on you and our alliances and partnerships with you, so I'm grateful you're here. Last week, Sergeant Major Black and I, the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and I went to San Diego, one of the two places where we make Marines. The other is Parris Island. And a few days before that, on Friday and Saturday before that, we went to Iwo Jima. And it's the annual commemoration of that battle. And there were 7 veterans of the Battle of Iwo Jima that made the annual trek this year. There aren't many left. And I start there because, as the Admiral mentioned, if you're ever frustrated at the discussions and priorities and activities, or whatever you want to call them, in Washington, D.C., all you have to do is go see where service members are trained, or a battlefield where they fought, and you realize the focus that they have and the talent, as Linda said, that we're fortunate to lead. You're in very good shape, people-wise. And this time of year, I think you would expect us to talk about budgets and programs and resources, but I'm going to focus on people also. I think for us in the Marine Corps, the focus has to be on people, because our force design modernization effort is not primarily about equipment. It's not about formations or how to organize units. The centerpiece for the Marine Corps' modernization program is the same place that the Marine Corps focus has always been, which is our people, the Marines and their families, and the sailors who serve with us. And that means how we bring them into the service, how we train them, how we educate them, how we develop them, how we retain them. All of that we have to focus on. And I think sometimes as senior leaders, we think we're doing the right job by talking with Marines or talking with sailors or talking with Coast Guardsmen and women. But if nothing else I've learned in the past years, most important thing most often we can do is listen, actually, not talk. If we ask them what's important to them, it's not all that complicated. They live somewhere, the barracks or their family housing, and they get up and they work out in the morning, fitness centers. And then they go home, and if they have kids, they're going to need to find a place to watch their kids during the day, child development centers. And they're going to work somewhere in a hangar or a maintenance bay or go to the field where they work, where they eat, where they live. All these are things that some people call quality of life, but for us, I think they are the centerpiece, they're the focus, and we must invest in that now. We have to keep the focus on that for years now. We can't take anything for granted. Well, I think if we listen more and understand what their priorities are, one good thing is this age group from 18 to 30, they are not bashful about telling us anything if we listen, and they'll let us know what their priorities are. So I think for me, the Marine Corps is in great shape. Our modernization effort is in a good place. But the focus, the primary focus for us is on people. And I look forward to the questions, sir.
General, thank you very much. Commandant Berger. I noted backstage, Chief, that this will be our last exchange on stage as the Chief of Naval Operations. I look forward to hearing your comments, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Congratulations to you on your new opportunity. We look forward to your program.
Thank you, sir.
For the Institute, thank you. For the Navy League, thank you for all you've done to make this conference come alive this week. It has great potential for great conversations, and I think a lot of learning. And lastly, Undersecretary Raven, thank you for your leadership, sir. We all appreciate it very, very much. It's interesting to have us up here today with different perspectives, but yet focused on singular mission, really, and that is in the maritime. And the maritime is beginning to get more congested by scale, by scope, by range of complexity. And it's driven us, I think, to search for multi-service, multi-domain, multinational, and interagency solutions. I think that our operations every day, whether it's Obagami Express, an exercise off the coast of Africa, or whether it is the Makin Island ARG and the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group in the South China Sea operating as a 7th Fleet battle force right now together, we see that kind of collaboration every single day. I appreciate the opening comments of my distinguished colleagues, and I thought that I'd talk about modernization for just a moment to open up that vector. So 70% of the fleet that we have today will have a decade from now. And often we talk about numbers with respect to the size of the fleet, and we spend a lot of time talking about readiness, including our most important asset, our sailors. But in terms of modernization, when we take a look at what investments that we're making for the fleet to ensure that we're more ready and more lethal, that's informed by the pacing challenge, that is the PRC. I think about 6 imperatives, and I talk about them in my navigation plan, and it not only informs the hybrid fleet of the future, but actually what we're investing in today. So the first has to do with distance, and I think if you look at our FY24 budget, the multi-year procurement authorities that we're leveraging for bundle buys of weapons with range and speed is going to be vitally important. SM-6, Naval Strike Missile with the Marine Corps, LRASM, AMRAAM with the Air Force. The investment in MQ-25 and that IOC in 2025 and what it does to extend the range and the lethality of a 4th and 5th gen integrated air wing at sea. So distance is first and foremost very important for us with respect to joint long-range fires. The second is deception. So how do we maintain our maneuverability and hence our survivability? At a classified level, a lot of effort goes into the space and cyber domains and a counter C5 ISRT campaign that we are busy bringing to life for the Navy. Also, battle management aids that some of you in this audience have helped us to leverage the EW spectrum in a way that we haven't before to give us more power in that particular domain. I also think about the investments we're making along with the Air Force in the Marine Corps in the next generation air wing that we'll field later on in this decade. The third point is defense, and we talked a little bit about SM-6, Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, but also soft kill capabilities as well. In the EW arena, the Surface EW Improvement Program, CWIP Block 3, that we're putting on some of our destroyers and our carriers to make them more lethal, not only in how they sense the environment, but also in electronic attack. The investments that we're making in cyber are also extremely important with respect to our ability to maneuver. A whole range of unmanned as well brings something to the table with respect to that. In terms of the next point I would make is distribution, and our distributed fleet with respect to unmanned primarily, what we're doing right now in fleet battle problems, an integrated exercise leveraging manned and unmanned teaming to bring together a hybrid fleet in the years ahead. We are scaling the operations that we're doing in the Middle East and scaling them to other AORs soon. Investments we're making, if I could just go back to defense for a second, high-powered microwave and directed energy are also not just theoretical, not just aspirational, they're in the fleet today. Important for the Marine Corps and for the Navy is delivery. And so our investment in the John Lewis class oilers, there are 6 in the budget. There are 6 medium landing ships for the Marine Corps in support of force design. We're building 2 sub-tenders in this fit-up. We're building 3 next-generation logistics ships. We are experimenting with unmanned in terms of how we increase our ability to effectively and efficiently sustain the fleet and the Marine Corps at their forward operating bases. And lastly, with respect to decision advantage, Operation Overmatch, Project Overmatch is in full swing right now with the Vincent Strike Group off the coast of California. We hope to scale that based on what we hope to see out of that experimentation in the next coming months. Also, our investment in integrated combat system that allows us to, historically, it's taken us about 8 years to get hardware changes to the fleet and 6 years to get associated software changes, to completely flip that with software updates within 30 days and hardware enhancements within 6 months. That'll completely change our combat systems and our approach in the future. So with that, Mr. Rose, I will turn it back over to you and cast off. And
CNO, thank you very much. I note that all of you at some point in your remarks, generally up front, addressed people. And you each referenced to some degree or other investments in people. And Administrator Phillips, I would like to start with you. Can you elaborate a little bit on the investments that you're making in people, or the investments that you'd like to make in people, and how you want to move that forward, ma'am?
So thanks for the question. I'll build on comments I made earlier about the NSMV. And the maritime world, our international U.S. flag trading fleet, privately owned vessels, 85 of them, plus the Ready Reserve Force is how we move forward. We need people to man those vessels, and they need to be U.S. mariners. So to be able to get those people, you have to train them, and that is what the NSMV that I talked about is predominantly for. It is a multi-mission vessel because it is a national asset. It could be called upon to do the nation's bidding for other requirements. Humanitarian assistance, defense support to civil authorities are two examples that could come up. But they are predominantly training vessels, state-of-the-art, and they will train our future generation of mariners, working with our state maritime academies, also working with Kings Point. That is an opportunity to train our licensed mariners. We are also investing in people's safety at sea, which I talked about. If you feel that you aren't going to be safe in an environment, you're probably not going to sign on for that as a career choice. And so this is a long-needed culture change and mindset shift within the industry. We are seeing industry and labor and stakeholders come forward and embrace this, but this is a whole-of-government set of challenges, and it will be a whole-of-government set of solutions. I think I should also, as I talk about this, remind everyone that these are just the first steps in what we do to move forward. This is an ongoing process, and we're, as I mentioned, very closely aligned with our Coast Guard partners. They are our law enforcement authority. There are items in the Coast Guard Act that help expand upon the embark process that will actually impact all vessels, and that's very important as well. The last piece I think I would say in the context of people is very similar, General, to your comments. When you listen to mariners and ask them what they want now about their quality of life, they will tell you, and it's pretty simple. They want internet. They want gym equipment. They want good food, and I can tell you on the Ready Reserve Force, good food is not a problem. But they want that connectivity, and they want a modern quality of life. In other words, they want vessels that are well-maintained, that are cared for, and that give them some opportunities to be able to move up, to have an established career path so that they can move forward. So to do that, you need enough vessels for them to see that there's a career path coming. That gets to building these training vessels, but it also gets to things we're doing like the Tanker Security Program, which will begin to grow the U.S. flag fleet opportunities and to grow opportunities for different kinds of training and requirements over time. So all this fits together. Got to have people. To have more people, you need more spots for them, which means you need more vessels, and then you need things for those vessels to carry. They have to have cargoes. So mandatory carrying by U.S. flag commercial vessels, all DOD things, 50% for civilian agencies, but the opportunity to continue to increase that capacity gives us the opportunity to pull more people into the training environment, get them trained up, get them at sea, and get them to see that there is a place for them at sea and a sustained career path over time.
Ma'am, thank you for that. Admiral Fagan, you referenced investing in marketing specifically. How much of that marketing is to people that you want to bring into the Coast Guard? How much of it's for people that you want to stay in the Coast Guard that have already signed up?
Yeah, thank you. Right now, the primary focus is on bringing additional people into the force. So I've learned in time, a lot of time in uniform in the Coast Guard, and stunningly, many people in the nation do not know we have a Coast Guard, know what the Coast Guard does, or the true opportunity that the service represents. And so there's an awareness that we need to work to reduce so that a young person in Kansas knows that there's a Coast Guard and that there's opportunity to serve in a maritime sector. So I will tell you, those young people that I referenced in Cape May, usually what I'll ask them, how did you find us? And sometimes it's the internet. Usually it's just kind of a random encounter, either in a recruiting office or in a high school guidance counselor's office. We need to do better at sparking awareness. But every one of those kids, when I'll say, how did you find us, or some path to it, but then they all go, if I had known about the Coast Guard, I would have joined much sooner. If I'd known that I could work on aircraft and fly in them at the, as part of my job, had I known about the humanitarian mission, I would have joined sooner. We're, in addition to increasing just recruiting capacity, 9 new recruiting offices, we're standing up junior ROTC programs as a way, in addition to just sort of additional outreach advertising to increase awareness about who we are as a service and an organization. For the workforce that I have now, we're in a good place from a retention standpoint. But if we don't make investments in what, again, people want the same things. They want a safe environment to go to work in. They want to know that their families are in adequate housing, that they've got access to childcare, that they have connectivity. We're working on those types of investments as well to ensure that the people who are already serving with us have the quality of life and experience that'll help keep them in the service. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. General Berger, did you hear things from the people that you talked to, or does your team hear things from them that maybe you didn't expect, that surprised you about what they want? The things that you laid out seem pretty fundamental, and I wonder if there are other things there that caused your team to say, maybe we need to move on that also.
The visible ones you mentioned, the places where they live, the facilities where they work, those are the visible ones that most people would certainly think about. And we have to put the resources into there because they aren't at the standards that all our service members expect, not across the board. We have to raise that. But to your point, yeah, there are definitely other areas where we have to deliver on expectations that they have. Healthcare. There has been a contract, an understanding between service members and the nation that if you join the military, you're going to have the very best military care in the world, and you're going to have it accessible to you where you are. And we have to make sure that that's the case for as long as they serve and if they retire afterwards. We have to deliver on that wherever they are stationed, wherever they deploy. We have to provide them the mental health care, the reproductive health care. Those are all, to us, sitting up here, that's health care, period. We got to make sure we deliver on that. Quality of life, the other thing probably that most people wouldn't inherently, intuitively think about, quality of life for Marines in one key aspect is how well trained they are. If you're a leader, in other words, winning depends on the very best trained, well-led units you can have. So quality of life means the most realistic training we can provide. We have to put money, we have to resource that, as the CNO said, because that's our best chance at winning. You can have the best equipment possible. So we have to modernize our training and education and bring that into today's date and not the way perhaps that we trained 30 years ago, which was great then. But we have better methods of training now, so we have to evolve that too. Mm-hmm.
What's the delta, do you think, General, between where you are today and where you'd like to be vis-a-vis training?
If it's going to a course, we have to evolve from all of us check in on the same day at the same classroom and we're all going to graduate 3 months from now no matter what. Nobody does that anymore. We all learn at different paces and we have to match that. We have to incentivize performance in training and education. The training itself, what's the delta? We have to, and we're partway down this path, we have to be able to link the ships that are training off the East Coast with an exercise that's going on in the South China Sea with something unmanned that's happening in Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, with some Marine unit that's flying F-35s in 29 Palms. We have to tie all that together so that the virtual, live, constructive, all aspects of that are all woven together. That's how we take it to another level. And we're headed there, but we got to keep the resources behind it or it will fall off again. We can't let that happen.
Commandant, thank you. Admiral Gilday, you and I have talked about readiness on a number of occasions regarding personnel. Same question as to your colleagues. Where are you investing and where do you want to go? What's your vision for where the fleet is in good shape at some point in the future?
I'll make 2 points. The first on training, as the Commandant mentioned, we're making significant investment in live virtual constructive training. So in other words, being able to tie together ships at sea off the east coast of the United States with an ARG that's in the Middle East, with ships that are tied up pierside that aren't underway, but you would think they're underway if you're in Combat Information Center and you work in a battle problem. And to make it extremely realistic, we are leveraging the technology from the gaming community in Orlando for a generation of gamers. And so that is the future. We found it to be highly effective, and we're going to continue on that path. The Secretary has supported that very, very well. The other area is ready, relevant learning. To the Commandant's point, the traditional brick and mortar house training that we've done is not necessarily the way it needs to be in the future. And so putting the right information in the hands of our sailors and Marines at the right time is what we're endeavoring to do. And it's not cookie cutter. It's more innovative and creative, but that is the path with respect to training. I would say with respect to talent management, what we're trying to do in the Navy and the enlisted side with detailing marketplace is to truly be much more transparent in terms of what's available to sailors, so that if it's a single sailor or one with a family, they have play a much greater role, have much more leverage in deciding what they're going to do next and how they manage their own career from apprentice to journeyman to supervisor. They're thirsty for that. We are committed to delivering it. We're relatively early in this process of delivering that to the fleet, but we're very optimistic in terms of where it's headed.
Thank you, sir.
Can I just,
please.
one other thought I think that's relevant to this crowd. It's not necessarily an investment, but part of that realistic training that we're all talking about has to happen with our allies and partners.
Yep.
And this Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary Hicks have put the effort behind finding ways to share information and train alongside the people that we have to operate alongside. Sometimes we get in our own way by over-classifying, over-compartmentalizing. And yet we say our strategy is underpinned by allies and partners. You can't have it both ways. So I'm glad to see, we're glad to see the last few years of finding ways where we can share information systems and information in a much better way than we could in the past. Because we have to get to that point, and both Dr. Hicks and Secretary Austin put their shoulders into it, and it's paying off.
What's facilitated that, General?
Everything from the most highly compartmentalized programs we have, actually putting them under a microscope, and do they have to be at the level of classification they're at? Could we consolidate them? To our combat information centers aboard ship and on land, where we can no longer have this section only for U.S., these screens only for U.S. if you're going to operate as a team. So they're finding ways not to bend policies, but actually to adjust policies within the law so that we can train.
Can I make just one follow-up on that? I think Ukraine opened up doors with respect to information and intel sharing in an unprecedented way. Yeah. And I think that has caused us to really take stock in the framework that we have and what the potential is in the future in terms of, turning allies and partners loose to a greater degree with respect to how we share some of the most sensitive information with them.
Well, I think that's a good direction to go in then. How do you see warfighting looking differently, Chief, in 5 years, 10 years as a result of what we're seeing in Ukraine? And you've each mentioned PRC at least once. What's that evolution look like in your view, sir?
So in my opening comments, I talked about multinational, multi-service, multi-domain. That's absolutely the way of the future. But I think what you see in Russia, Ukraine, particularly from Ukraine, is the power of people and the ability of the Ukrainians to learn war while they're fighting war and to turn quickly ideas into actionable and take use of that technology. The fact that they are bringing technologists from the private sector to the front lines is actually force-feeding new technology that you typically wouldn't get through our much more laborious PBBE system into the fight today. And so I think, as everybody here has foot stomped, that people remain our asymmetric advantage, and that's where the priority investment has to be.
I'd like to shift to platforms for a moment, and then we have some questions from the audience. There's been a discussion lately about a couple of platforms, Chief and Commandant Berger. Tell the audience where you are as far as some of the platforms that you're asking for now and status of some that are in progress.
Can you start?
Yeah, overall, we are in really good shape with respect to both the Office of the Secretary of Defense's support for and the Congress's support for shipbuilding and aircraft procurement. And so right now we've got 55 ships in the FIDP, 9 in the budget for 24. All of our production lines are humming at 7 shipyards around the country. Most recently on Friday, we put LPD 32 on contract at a good price, and we hope to leverage the multi-year authorities that we have to keep that great line of ship going. So I think, I don't want to speak for the Commandant, but I think we're optimistic about the direction we're headed in with respect to stable, predictable funding for ships, whether it's the frigates, the destroyers that we're building in Bath and HII, the logistic ships, the John Lewis Oilers we're building out of San Diego, the submarines out of both Newport News and also Groton, or the work that Austal's doing as well. I think that we are headed in a very good place, and we hope to sustain that.
Commandant?
I think that I would wholly agree. I think although my horizon as a service chief, I've tried to, from the first day, stay about 10 years out because I think that's my value to the service. I think contrast that with the modernization effort for us, which is, and like them, is actually fielding capabilities now, not 5 years or 10 years from now, but now. The platforms are everything from the individual equipment that a Marine wears, which is extraordinary now and carries with them, all the way to the warfighting ships that move us around. The aircraft modernization of the Marine Corps, which is about 12, 15 years in the making, is now just so far down the road. It's incredible, the capability that you put together all of our aviation capabilities and command and control and logistics. It's pretty eye-watering. But I would say not a platform, but we have to focus on logistics. Because the time to set the theater, which we grew up thinking was 30, 60 days, 45 days, is shorter than that now. We have to be ready now. We're not going to get a lot of time for indications and warnings. So logistics in a contested environment, really important. But I couldn't I couldn't say it any stronger. I think the power of information in a conflict right now is extraordinary. And the ability of either side to understand how to use that information and make the adjustments that Admiral Gilday talked about faster than the adversary is going to have a great advantage.
Thank you, sir. Commandant Fagan, both of your predecessors were very outspoken about the need for the Polar Security Cutter. You referenced it a few moments ago. That's maybe your highest profile platform, but tell us about the others that you're advocating for.
No,
also.
thank you. And obviously, as an Arctic nation, we need that polar capacity. Polar Star, which was my first unit as a young ensign, is in the process of returning from her 26th deep freeze, and so there's a sense of urgency to get that capacity fielded for the nation. The Offshore Patrol Cutter is really front and center as now the cornerstone of the fleet. They're replacing the medium endurance cutters, and in the 24 President's budget, we've got funding support now for OPC 6 and 7, and are looking forward to have OPC 1 Argus in the water here soon. So just great state-of-the-art vessels. Waterway Commerce Cutters program office stood up for an additional Great Lakes icebreaker. We're in a great place with regard to acquisition, and we're enjoying just great support from our authorizers and overseers. We still have significant infrastructure backlog. Every one of our Coast Guard missions starts and ends at a shore facility, and some of these shore facilities are in pretty rough shape. Piers in Maine that you can't actually handle any kind of weight to load buoys onto ships, and so getting support for 3 to 5% growth in our infrastructure funding account is a priority area for us. Any growth that we're seeing budget rise right now is going to operate the organization, and so ensuring that we're making the right infrastructure investments, IT investments, all of those key enablers around the new ships and aircraft are a priority of focus area. But we are excited for the Polar Security Cutter.
Ma'am, thank you for that. Administrator Phillips, you referenced the Empire State Program, and you said that there were some lessons that you've learned there that might be useful for the other services. What are some of those, and what are some of the other things that you're focused on platform-wise?
So thank you for the question about, I've spoken about NSMB several times already. What's different about that program for us is, first of all, this is a commercial vessel. It is built to a commercial standard. So American Bureau of Ships, think INSER, for those who aren't familiar with that organization. Coast Guard regulations and requirements. It's SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea, which is an international requirement. So we're not building using gen specs. We're building using a commercial standard. We started with 100% design and a firm fixed price contract. So we are able to move through that so far with great success, and are optimistic that we will continue to be able to do so. As I've mentioned earlier, the proof is in the pudding. We'll be going to sea shortly with the first hull, Empire State, and we'll see how we do there. But that has helped with this vessel construction manager oversight program. We have an authorized contractor. TOTE is our contractor supporting that work for us. Provide oversight in the yard, and we believe this is an effective model, and it is a way to build commercial-grade ships that must continue. But let's talk about building capacity there, though. Philadelphia Shipyard is building these ships. They build a series of 5 for me, then what's next? Well, they've shown by their ability to build these vessels and other vessels before them that they can continue. They have other orders coming in from private industry, from commercial carriers. That's good. That's one yard. So how do we keep this going to the point more nationwide? And I would add that just because you can repair a vessel, and oh, by the way, we're competing for repair capacity with the Coast Guard, with the Navy, with the Army Corps, and with commercial industry. And so we find ourselves constantly having to work together to trade spots, to trade time, to make sure that we can get ships in when we need them so the operational force is ready to go. And that often our ships take a back seat there, which we understand and completely support. But more capacity in dry docks is definitely needed. And yards that repair don't necessarily have the full skill set to build. So more capacity to be able to build as well. This, again, is a whole of government challenge. We are a piece of that puzzle, but we are not the entire solution. It has to be something that we think about, as a national asset and as a national requirement and responsibility, particularly in light of the threat that General Berger is talking about here. We are entering a world at a time where we are going to need this lift. We are going to need sea lift. We are going to need our U.S. flag vessels, and we're supposed to be carrying the majority of our import and export overseas commerce, we carry about 2% with the U.S. flag vessels that we have right now, with U.S. flag. So plenty of things come in and out of this country, but most of that is carried on our vessels that belong to our allies and partners and others. So something else to think about in this mix is what do we want to be here and how are we preparing ourselves to have control of our own destiny in this context?
We probably could have done the whole hour on shipbuilding, and unfortunately we couldn't. I'll ask you question, folks, for your name, who you're with, who your question is for if it's directed to a particular member of the panel, and then I'll ask you to get right to the question so we can do as many as we can. First one there, sir, welcome.
Absolutely. Captain John Conrad, U.S. Merchant Marine, and editor with G-Captain. General Berger, you said at the Senate hearing, logistics, logistics, logistics. In the last year, I have, especially the last few months, I've been hearing from merchant mariners all over that Marines at every level are reaching out to learn about the sea lift ships and learn about what the job is and what needs to be done and invited to the conversation. So a real heartfelt thank you. But logistics requires ships. The U.S. Air Force's entire air cargo capacity is less than can fit on one Maersk container ship. We need ships, and Admiral Gilday, NAVSEA has the most diverse workforce. These are really highly educated people who are working really well. But the Coast Guard's projects are outbuilding them. And MARAD's project is the only one major ship, multi-mission vessel here that's on budget and on schedule. And how they did it, and it's run by Lina Linares, a minority woman engineer. They're doing a great job. NAVSEA has 86,000 people. That's twice the entire size of the Coast Guard, and MARAD has only 800. So how are they outbuilding him? And I talked to the NAVSEA, and they're with quality management programs, and they're doing red tape, and they're at meetings. I think MARAD's success is twofold. One, they have an office on Wall Street, so they understand the finance. And two, they only have Lena. They don't have anyone to put this red tape in. So how are we cutting red tape at NAVSEA to unlock this amazing workforce, one? And two, my neighbor in Great Barrington's Keith Sharman of 60 Minutes, I've been talking to him consistently about this, your thing, and saying, can we get Ann Phillips on the 60 Minutes show? And he said, she does not have the weight. People don't know her. You have the weight. General Berger has the weight.
Oh, well.
So can we I talked to the press corps, DOD press corps. They don't know the Merchant Marine. So can you guys promise me that you'll get Lena and Ann to the Pentagon briefing room? And
Sir, let's leave it there. Thank you for the question and get a response.
I'll just say this with respect to Sea Lift. And so we recognize the problem. What we're trying to do to get after it quickly, I mentioned in my opening comments the next generation logistics ships, and we have a few of those in the budget. What people don't see is the used ships that we're buying, the used Sea Lift. And so at probably about 10 to 20% the cost of new, some of the age of these ships range from maybe 11 years to 26 years. We bought 2 last year. We bought another 3 in February of this year, and we have 2 across the FIDP. I know that doesn't blow your socks out of the water, but it's at a much faster pace in terms of outcomes than a new hull. So that's the
lessons is
Sir,
Navy learned?
sir, I apologize. We have a long list of people behind you that are waiting to ask questions also. Thank you very much for that. Megan, welcome. It's good to see you.
Hi, good to see you. Megan Eckstein with Defense News. My question's for Admiral Gilday. Last week at the Senate Appropriations Committee, you were asked about an upcoming force structure assessment that's due directly to Congress, not going through DOD. And you mentioned that you thought the number might be upwards of the current 373 and that the character and the balance of that fleet might look a little different. I know you can't get into specifically what that looks like, but I wonder if you could just describe why the character of the fleet might be changing. Is it a difference between manned and unmanned, small and large combatants? Just kind of what did you mean by that changing?
Yeah, the reason I said that is because we have a new defense strategy in 2022, and we have new force sizing constructs that are classified that actually shape the force of the future. And we see those guidelines come alive in defense planning scenarios that are really the foundational to any analysis that we do. And so there are known unknowns there with respect to the analysis we're going into. The reason I said I can't see it going below 373 is because just of what I see on a day-to-day basis with respect to demand, the war games that I've participated in, and what I believe to be the importance of the naval force in a maritime fight. So fundamental, obviously.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, welcome.
Hi, Justin Katz with Breaking Defense. Administrator Phillips, I also wanted to ask about Sealift. I promise I'll cut right to the chase. In 2018, General Lyons, the Transcom commander, characterized 2025 as kind of the year potentially of a crisis, where the capacity would dip so low that there's going to be alarms ringing. Now that 2025 is not so far off, I wanted to get your kind of comments and confidence level on how is Sealift recap going. Is 2025 still a year potentially of crisis, or do you think it's been averted?
So thank you for the question. I'd be interested to know what General Lyons was cataloging as crisis at the time. But I will say this, as the CNO has discussed, we are buying used. And as I mentioned earlier, the Sealift that the nation needs requirement study. 3 prongs: recapitalize, which we're doing; buy used, which we're doing; consider building new. Okay, Congress has told us to consider that. They authorized something, but they didn't appropriate it. So we're moving forward, and if you heard my testimony and General Van Novo's testimony last week, with all best speed to execute the Vessel Acquisition Manager program, the buy used, with the assets that we have available. So that we will continue to do that. If capacity opportunities presented to accelerate that, that is another way to move forward there. I've heard people speak of that. We spoke of that in our hearing last week. But with these 3 prongs, we're focusing on the 2 that we have right now, the tools at our disposal: recapitalize and buy used, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we'll keep doing. And so as long as we are able to keep doing that, we begin to make headway, but we can't afford a lapse. I'll be honest there. Any hesitation, and we're going to start to slip backwards quickly.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? And this has to do with requirements. And so I just talked about the fact that we're going through another drill with respect to our analysis to double check our requirements based on a new strategy and evolving concepts of operation in terms of how we're going to fight in the future, including the joint warfighting concept. That applies to Sealift as well. And so the Sealift we needed, the current figures that we have are grounded on analysis that was done decades ago. And so that's an obvious question to ask. The Marines are operating differently. The Army's operating a little differently. Exactly how much Sealift do you need?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name's Matt Brown. I used to be the captain of one of our Navy's warships. I left active duty a few years ago to start a mental health care company because my very best young officer went to a Marine Corps exchange and bought a 9mm pistol and took his own life. So since then, I've partnered with every academic that I can find that works in suicide prevention and force mental health, and we've created an expeditionary cognitive behavioral therapy tool to eliminate suicide in our sea services. I'm proud to report that for the Marine Corps, we've been able to make some inroads, frankly, because there was just like a dogged willingness to get the job done. We had the right people in the seats, Dr. Lelia Brady in particular. She just would not take no for an answer and found the money. But we have been talking to everyone that would listen within the Navy and Coast Guard team to try and get contracts for this cognitive behavioral therapy course to put our troops through. And have been met with not resistance, but a lack of funds or ability to do anything. And so I know a little bit about defense acquisitions, and what I'm interested to know, I think maybe Admiral Gilday, this would be for you, sir. Are you open to using the existing capital tools that we have, like Defense Innovation Unit, other transactional authorities, or any of those sorts of things to address force mental health, specifically suicide prevention? We have the tools now.
We have been using them. And so you might not be the only vendor in this space, and I'd be happy to connect you with the right person to talk about what we are investing in so that you can get a better sense of where we are.
Okay. Thank you for the question, sir.
Thank you. John Harper with Defense Scoop. Admiral Gilday, you mentioned that Project Overmatch is in full swing right now with the Vinson, and there are plans to scale that. Can you say which units will be getting that next, and what the time frame might be for rolling that out to other carrier strike groups or other units? And then more broadly, are there plans to bring the Coast Guard into that Project Overmatch networking construct? And how do you see that playing?
Yeah, to the latter, I would say absolutely. We have allies and partners tied in now. The Marine Corps is tied in now. I won't talk about publicly where we're going next. We're learning from each iteration and making informed decisions based on that. Based on what we've seen so far with Vinson, we're on schedule. I will say that, and on track in terms of the objectives that we're seeking and where we want to go with it. So I think that this joint tactical grid that we hope to yield for the force becomes a reality at scale.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. With apologies to the rest of you in line, I'm very sorry, but this will be the last question.
Good morning. First Class Cadet Turner Linnefelter, here from the United States Coast Guard Academy with my Arctic Area Research course. So my question is directed at Admiral Fagan, but I would appreciate answers from the rest of the panel as well. So Admiral Fagan, you continued to highlight that the United States is an Arctic nation. With the Coast Guard as the lead agency in Arctic strategy, I'm curious to know how and if we are working to include and broaden Arctic cooperation across the interagency, especially with the Department of the Navy and our merchant mariners, to increase buy-in to Arctic importance.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to see that we've got some cadets here at Sea Air Space. Why emphasize that we are an Arctic nation? We don't do this alone. And allies and partners in the Arctic are absolutely critical. And so things like the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, the Arctic Council, I was recently in Copenhagen and Norway, all critical partnerships to all of our shared national security and security interest in the Arctic. And so while the Coast Guard will operate the surface fleet of icebreakers for the nation, we will continue to partner with the Navy, allies, and partners to ensure that we've got the resourcing and the partnerships that we need as a nation to afford our security in the Arctic. Thank you.
What year are you?
The first team.
I'm a first class cadet, class of 2023, so graduating this summer.
Are you working on a final paper or something? Is that why you asked?
Yes.
That was a good call on your part.
Very savvy, young man. Well done, sir. Now I see why you're invested in the people, Admiral.
Yeah, smart.
Very well done. Thanks, all of you, very much for joining me again this year. It's been a privilege to have this conversation with you all. My thanks to the Navy League, to Mike and Julia and the rest of the team, and my thanks to all of you for your attention. I hope to see you Sunday morning, April 30th on ABC 7 at 10:30. Thank you all very much.